looking for you. Scooby Doo, where are you? All the stars are here, waiting for you. Couldn't have a show without you. Scooby, Scooby-Doo, Scooby, Scooby-Doo.
Hello, Scooby Doo fans! Welcome to my Season 1 Episode 7 review of the new Scooby Doo movies. So last time I began my 2024 summer special with the release of my review, my re-review actually, of Season 1 Episode 2 of Scooby Doo, Where Are You? A Clue for Scooby Doo. So I hope you guys enjoyed that episode. But obviously, of course, today I will be continuing my reviews of the new Scooby Doo movies. And I will be covering Season 1, Episode 7 of the new Scooby Doo movies, titled Sandy Duncan's Jekyll and Hyde, which was released on October 21st, 1972. The short synopsis of the episode is, Sandy Duncan is on the set of her latest film at Mammoth Studios, but it is due to be torn down after shooting and replaced by a super-duper market. However, the film is behind schedule because someone keeps disrupting the filming. So yeah, as the title and the short synopsis of the episode suggest, today's guest star is Sandy Duncan. Now, who is Sandy Duncan? Well, much like the last couple of guest stars, Sandy Duncan isn't exactly a very household name, and not many of you will probably even know. Sandy Duncan hasn't been in too many high-profile stuff. Like I usually say all the time, unless if you're probably an older individual and you're very niche with your watching, because she's been in a few things that I'll get into, but for the most part, Sandy Duncan isn't I wouldn't say was as big as Jonathan Winters, Don Knotts, or even Phyllis Diller back in those days. At least not from what I'm looking at. Sandy Duncan was more of a smaller actress. So, I mean, unless if you were older and probably were into certain stuff that maybe she would happen to be in, you probably know her. Otherwise, if you're my age or younger, or if you weren't as expansive with what you watched, you probably aren't too familiar with Sandy Duncan as a guest star. So, here's a quick rundown of who Sandy Duncan is. So Sandy Duncan is an American actress, comedian, dancer, and singer who was born on February 20th, 1946 in New London, Texas. Now, normally I would talk about, like, an actor or actress's film roles or TV roles, but Sandy Duncan's a very prolific theater actress as well, and her credits are named as one of her more memorable stuff. And she also began her career in theater, obviously. So here's just a couple of theater productions that she's well known for. She began her acting career in theater on productions such as The King and I from 1958, and she did a 2004 revival of the same play. She did The Sound of Music in 1964 and 1967. She did her most biggest theater production and the production that she's very well known for, which is Peter Pan in 1966. And she did a 1979 to 1981 revival of Peter Pan. She also did a play called Driving Miss Daisy in 2009 and in 2014. As for her film roles, she doesn't have too many of them, but in film, she has memorable roles such as The $1 Million Duck, where she played Katie Dooley, The Cat from Outer Space, where she played Liz, and The Fox and the Hound, where she voiced Vixie. However, in TV, she has a lot more prolific roles in television. She was a very big television actress. So in TV, she has memorable roles such as her own show called The Sandy Duncan Show, where she played herself in 13 total episodes in 1972. She did the TV movie Pinocchio, where she plays the titular character Pinocchio, an episode of The $6 Million Man, and an episode of The Bionic Woman, which she played Gillian in a two-parter that connected both series, an episode of The Muppet Show where she plays herself as a guest star, an episode of The Love Boat where she plays Sharon Barker, a TV short called My Little Pony Rescue at Midnight Castle where she voices Firefly, Applejack, and Medley. Then we have her possibly biggest television role where she was part of the main cast from season 3 onwards of the TV show titled Valerie's Family / The Hogan's Family, which ran from 1987 to 1991. An episode of Law & Order called Paranoia, where she plays defense attorney Michelle Shelley Cates. And 2 episodes of Law & Order Special Victims Unit, where she plays the trial judge Virginia Farrell. At the time of this episode, like I said before, she was doing her own show called The Sandy Duncan Show for 13 total episodes. And she was a guest star on the Sonny and Cher Comedy Hour that same year, which is ironic considering who the guest stars will be in the next episode. Thankfully, Sandy Duncan is actually one of the only 2 surviving guest stars from the new Scooby Doo movies that still is alive and kicking today. She's in her 70s at this point, and she's still alive, and she actually will make an appearance in a later Scooby-Doo show, which is the spiritual successor to this one, or reboot, or whatever you want to call it, Scooby-Doo and Guess Who, which ironically is the last thing she was in. Scooby-Doo and Guess Who is her most recent role that she's been in. She hasn't really been in anything since, theater, movie, or TV-wise. But Scooby-Doo and Guess Who was her last, her latest role. Now, what's my experience with Sandy Duncan? I'm not too familiar with Sandy Duncan outside of Scooby-Doo. I actually am not familiar with her work at all. The only thing that really pops out to me, besides her appearances in this show, the new Scooby-Doo movies, and the later Scooby-Doo show, Scooby-Doo and Guess Who, is the 2-parter of the $6 Million Man and the Bionic Woman that connect the 2 shows. Because those 2 shows often get brought up with 2 shows that I like, which are The Incredible Hulk, the 1977 Incredible Hulk show, or 78, and The Fugitive, the 1963 show. So, those are 2 of my favorite old shows, and The $6 Million Man and The Bionic Woman often get brought up with those 2 shows, and I believe some of the crew from those 2 shows worked on those 2. So it is pretty interesting that Sandy Duncan seemed to have played a role in both of those shows in a 2-parter. So if I ever do watch that show one day, it will be fun to see what Sandy Duncan is like in those episodes. But otherwise, yeah, I'm not too familiar with Sandy Duncan, so this is a new experience for me. But obviously, I want to ask you guys, what is your experience with Sandy Duncan? Are you a huge fan of Sandy Duncan? Do you like her as an actress? Are you not too familiar with Sandy Duncan? You're not that big of a fan of her? And what do you think of her guest appearance in the new Scooby-Doo movies? Just this episode, because we'll get on to Guess Who when we get there. Do you like it? Do you think it was a good pair up? Let me know in the comment section below. So, of course, today I'll be watching Season 1, Episode 7 of the new Scooby-Doo movies on the new Scooby-Doo movies, the Almost Complete Collection. This DVD has every single episode of the new Scooby-Doo movies, minus the Addams Family episode, which if you want to know more about, I talk about in my review of the Addams Family episode, and it has good special features that I will get into when we get to the last episode of the new Scooby-Doo movies. Now, as far as the reception on the Sandy Duncan episode, this particular episode as a whole, I believe most fans do like this episode, at least from what I've heard. It's been praised a good amount. So, why don't we take a look at the episode to see whether I think it is a good or bad episode of the new Scooby-Doo movies. The episode begins with the gang heading towards Mammoth Studios, a studio that's about to be torn down for a super-duper market. The gang is going to see Sandy Duncan in a remake of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and Shaggy even mentions that Scooby hadn't seen it before, and the gang are very excited about it, even Shaggy, and talks about how he very much enjoyed the original movies. And then a faceless person in white hogs the road and causes them to go partway off the bridge. And the gang finally meets Sandy, who's running from, I guess, the same ghost, or maybe a different ghost, I can't tell. They never show who was chasing after Sandy. I assume it's probably the same white ghost, but it could have been a different one. And Scooby falls in love with Sandy, which I'm not particularly a fan of. I think I don't really need to see interspecies romance in a Scooby-Doo cartoon, and I find it very odd and weird, so yeah, nothing to say about that. It's just odd. Sandy introduces the gang to the rest of her crew, which includes her stunt woman, Shirley, who, fun fact for you, is also voiced by Heather North, but just in a different voice. The manager of the studio, Mr. Thayer. The grumpy old director of the remake, Mr. Van Henstone. And Daphne's favorite actor, Duke Jason, and his stuntman, Slats. Sandy doesn't know why someone would want to delay the filming of this movie, but Shirley, having no filter, just goes over everyone's explanation of why she thinks everybody else would delay the filming. She explains that Thayer wants publicity, Van Henstone is saving money, and Slats hates Duke, which makes at least those three people prime suspects, as well as Shirley herself and Duke. While Sandy is getting ready to go start shooting, Scooby notices the ghostly figure from earlier that drove them off the road, and he's rigging a lamppost which is about to hurt Sandy, and Scooby thankfully charges to the rescue and saves Sandy just in the nick of time before the lamppost was about to fall on her. When they go to check out the crime, Shirley has had basically enough of this bullshit, and she just quits the film and says she's out of here and advises everybody to do the same. And Thayer and Van Henstone are very upset by this. They're like, we got more problems to deal with, and where are we going to find another stunt girl? And then they decide, they look at Daphne over Daphne and think she'd be a perfect new stunt girl for Sandy. Because in the movie, Sandy and Shirley both wore wigs that had similar hair color to Daphne's. And so Daphne is like the spitting image of the three of them when Sandy and Shirley put on those wigs with the dress. So with Daphne now involved in the filming of this and being the new stunt girl, Velma and Fred want to continue investigating for clues. Shaggy and Scooby aren't really up for it, and they just want to leave. And even the ghost gives them a hand by getting the mystery machine unstuck and pointing it towards the exit of the lot. But Fred and Velma aren't deterred by this and want to continue looking for clues. And so they ask Scooby to tell them what he saw when the white ghost was rigging the lamp to hurt Sandy. So Scooby explains what happened before the lamppost gets rigged, and the gang even poke fun at the fact that Scooby is fawning over Sandy Duncan, is acting all lovey-dovey, and I don't blame Shaggy for saying, like, boy, talk about a dumb dog, like just to, because he's trying to ask Scooby to get to the point instead of like being all lovey-dovey towards Sandy, and he also doesn't like that his best buddy is fawning over a human, which I don't blame him, because like it's weird, it's gross and disgusting. But it also is coming in between him and Scooby's relationship. He's worried that he might lose Scooby because Scooby is fascinated by Sandy Duncan. Once the gang figure out what Scooby is telling them, Scooby and Shaggy are talking on the area where the ghost was previously, and the ghost pulls a lever which opens a trapdoor, and this causes Scooby and Shaggy to both disappear. And Scooby and Shaggy end up in a tunnel. And Fred tries to open the trapdoor. He can't get it to open, so Velma suggests Shaggy and Scooby go through the tunnel until they reach an exit, while they follow Shaggy and Scooby to that same exit. And they ask that Shaggy and Scooby yell in the process so that they know where to follow them. So Scooby and Shaggy do so, and once they reach the exit and out of the tunnel, Scooby and Shaggy get stranded in a desert with what Shaggy calls a freaky sheik. And they run away from the freaky sheik. And I actually do like the chase scene with the freaky sheik. He's he's not scary or threatening, but he is pretty cool. Like, I do enjoy it. And you even get Shaggy and Scooby jumping in a car and driving away.
Hey, that was neat, Scoob. You got us out of the tunnel.
I did?
But look what you got us into.
What?
Like a desert.
Uh-oh.
What's the matter with you? Anything's better than that tunnel.
Anything?
Not quite anything. That's some freaky chic. Run!
Well?
Scooby, hurry! Isn't this great?
Shaggy and Scooby go to a pyramid, and for some odd reason to believe it to be a restaurant, which I don't know why in their right mind they would ever think that this is a restaurant. It really doesn't look good on Shaggy and Scooby's front. It makes them look pretty stupid, if I'm being honest, in the scene, that they believe this to be a restaurant. First, they believe, like, it's a restaurant that can, has drive-through, but then they're like, maybe they're short-staffed, so let's go in. Then they go in, and they think there's no waiters, so now they think it's like a serve-yourself restaurant, until they finally get the point that it's not a restaurant at all. And when they are in the pyramid, they're chased by a mummy and also a lion, but the lion ends up being mechanical and is controlled by the mummy. And Shaggy and Scooby pretty much escape and run out of there and drive off. Meanwhile, Daphne and Fred are in Shanghai being chased by a pirate and a dragon. And there's a couple things about this. First off, where is Velma, and how did they not catch up with Shaggy and Scooby already? Like, first off, like, how did they, like, did Shaggy and Scooby forget to yell, and that's why they lost them? Were they yelling at first, and then Fred and Daphne and Velma just couldn't hear their voices anymore, so they didn't know where to go? And how'd they lose Velma? Like, when the hell did they lose Velma? Like, how did they get separated? What separated Velma from Fred and Daphne? I don't understand. It's like they're missing a scene that would showcase all that. Like, it's very confusing, to say the least. But we get a nice, entertaining scene of Fred and Daphne dealing with this pirate, and Fred even, like, throws a cannonball at its feet and gets it wet. And I really enjoy that little chase scene with the pirate. And they deal with the dragon, too, which is also kind of cool. And Freddy even makes a nice little reference joke of Smokey the Bear.
How do you like this? We're in Shanghai.
It's creepy. Was this trip really necessary?
Hey, look! That must be a prop man. Let's ask him if he's seen Shag and Scooby.
Pardon me, sir, but have you seen...
Never mind! Run, Daphne! Look! Up there! Cannonball! Let's junk this junk! Here! Catch!
Well, there go any plans he might have had to Shanghai us.
Yeah, he's all wet.
After Fred and Daphne take care of the dragon by throwing dynamite at the dragon's feet and causes the pirate to fall out, and the pirate gets chased off by a bunch of barrels that Fred and Daphne throw at it into the water, we cut to Velma, who's by herself in Philadelphia. Still don't know how she lost Fred and Daphne, but she's calling for Fred, Daphne, Shaggy, and Scooby. And instead, the same pirate that was just in the water a couple seconds ago is right behind her, being a creep and sneaking up on her. And the pirate chases Velma into a boat. And Velma says that a clue is chasing her which I wouldn't really necessarily call the pirate a clue, just more so a villain is chasing you. And Fred and Daphne try to help Velma out and rescue her, but the pirate sends them to Alaska by pushing the boat away, and Fred even tells him, like, cut it out, you kook, which I don't know what Fred expected he was gonna do. Like, of course the pirate was gonna mess with you. I don't think calling him a kook and telling him to cut it out is going to do anything, Fred. Regardless, we see a scene from the intro of the new Scooby Doo movies where Fred, Daphne, and Velma are paddling towards Alaska. And in Alaska, the gang noticed this freaky-ass Wolfman just sneaking around. I wish this Wolfman was around a little bit longer because he was fucking freaky. I was like, what the hell is that? And Fred decides that they're going to trap them since they don't want to go back to Shanghai. And we cut to Scooby and Shaggy running with Scooby covering his eyes. And Scooby tells Shaggy to go left, but Shaggy goes right instead. So I don't know if he just wanted to go to his own direction or didn't hear Scooby right or something like that. But they end up in the trap, and Fred, Daphne, and Velma let them down. And Fred, Daphne, and Velma explained that they thought they were wolfmen. And Shaggy and Scooby explain that they were being chased by King Kong, which is weird because there's no scene of Shaggy and Scooby being chased by a man dressed as King Kong. But in the intro, you have this scene where the Mystery Machine is being chased by what looks like King Kong. So I do want to ask my viewers, like, was there a scene where Shaggy and Scooby were chased by King Kong when this originally aired, if anybody saw this when it aired? If not, I assume it had to be a deleted scene that the animators decided to cut for time, I'm assuming. Because there's a lot of stuff that, you know, doesn't add up, and there's, like, some scenes that are missing that look like they would, you know, like, how did Fred, Daphne, and Velma lose Shaggy and Scooby? How did Fred and Daphne lose Velma? And where's the scene of Shaggy and Scooby being chased by a guy dressed as King Kong? Because Shaggy and Scooby bring it up a lot in the episode after this, and we never see them chased by somebody dressed as King Kong. Suddenly, an angry grizzly bear starts chasing the entire gang into an old western town, and come on, man, you can even see the freaking eyes in that grizzly bear. It's so obvious it's a man in a costume. And there's also a nice little reference of Yogi Bear, which I'm assuming means that Yogi Bear exists in the Scooby universe, which is cool, actually. After Scooby mushes the gang towards the old western town and takes a breath, the gang, you know, notice a strange Indian. Well, Scooby in particular does first, and then the gang notices it, a strange Indian called Chief Blood in the Eye, who locks Fred, Daphne, and Velma in the bank and Shaggy and Scooby in jail, and at one point tries shooting arrows at them, and an arrow almost hits Velma in the head. Thankfully, Velma ducks her head before the arrow hits her in the head. Otherwise, that would have been ugly for Velma. After the whole gang bail out of their locked situation, as they seem to have slept through the night in the bank and in jail, they explain to Sandy that they were chased by a bunch of strange characters throughout the night, and they decide that they need to keep an eye on the suspects until they get the movie finished. However, despite the gang's vigilance of keeping everyone, you know, a close eye on every suspect, it does not work because when Daphne is getting ready, Mr. Hyde, who's not Slats or Duke, kidnaps Daphne off screen, thinking he's Sandy Duncan. Thinking that she's Sandy Duncan, and Scooby finds a ransom note, and it says this:
"Stop Sailor Studio if you ever want to see Sandy Duncan again."
With Daphne now in potential danger, Sandy Duncan decides she's going to assist the gang with their investigation and try to get Daphne back and see what's really going on. So Sandy and the gang decide to rescue Daphne, while Mr. Thayer and Mr. Van Henstone wait for the police to arrive. And they find a secret passage where Scooby and Sandy disappear, and they find a room full of signs with the missing letters, and so we figure out how Mr. Hyde made the ransom note that we just saw earlier. When the gang eventually get back together, they all hear Daphne's voice, and they stop on a medieval lot of some kind, and notice Daphne yelling at the top with Mr. Hyde, who merely gags her with a handkerchief. Sandy Duncan and the rest of the gang decide to take the ski lift up to the castle, but it doesn't end up working because Mr. Hyde ends up noticing the kids on their way to rescue Daphne. And he's annoyed by this because he says, I thought I thoroughly convinced them last night that they weren't a match for me. So he takes who he thinks is Sandy Duncan to a different location, and he escapes with Daphne in a golf buggy while the gang give chase while riding on a sled. And I like the sled chase because it's fun, it's entertaining, and it's high stakes because the gang are trying to catch up to Mr. Hyde with Daphne, since we have no idea of even though Mr. Hyde says he won't harm her, we don't know, what his intentions will be and what he's going to do next. And he could easily hurt Daphne or somebody else if not careful. So, still though, I like the sled chase scene. It's fun.
Don't worry, Miss Duncan. I won't harm you. You'll be perfectly safe and comfortable in this tower. I'll bring you your interfering fan club, Miss Duncan. I thought I'd thoroughly convinced them last night they were no match for me. Mere children with a stupid dog.
Oh, no! He's seen us!
And he's getting away again.
How do you get off this thing?
When you reach the platform, you jump off and land on your skis.
What if you haven't got skis?
That's right, Shag. Use the next best thing. Come on, Scooby. You're next.
Hurry, Sandy!
Now he's going that way.
And we're going right that way.
We've got to get off this thing or we'll lose him completely.
I don't see any brakes.
I have a feeling you will. Like in Bones. Broken ones.
And there's no way to steer it off the track. We've simply got to think of something. Oh, Scooby.
Nice try, Scooby, but I could have told you couldn't do it alone.
Right. Come on, everybody. Turn right. Make a right.
So the whole gang land at a graveyard, and Fred notices Mr. Hyde carrying Daphne into the mausoleum. Sandy decides to come up with a plan to confuse Mr. Hyde, and Mr. Hyde mocks the bound and gagged Daphne because he's wondering how he's hearing Sandy Duncan outside, but he thinks he has Sandy Duncan in the room. And so when he opens, only to hear, Sandy free, he opens the door and is knocked down, and the plan ends up working, and Fred and Shaggy knock the door down and get Daphne free. They unmask Mr. Hyde, and it's revealed to be an unknown guy who is an actor who supposedly went missing, and his name is Zalia Z. Fairchild. Mr. Fairchild has been secretly living in Mammoth Studio for several years, and he's dressed up as many strange creatures to delay the finishing of the movie so the studio wouldn't be torn down, and that's why he did what he was doing. That was his motive. The police were going to take Fairchild into custody, but Sandy decides against this to help Fairchild, since Mr. Thayer thought the publicity was pretty good, and they said he didn't really hurt anybody, and, why don't we help him out? And to be fair, while he could have hurt Sandy at certain points, as well as the rest of the gang at other points, he never was malicious, so I totally get why he wasn't going to get arrested in jail time. Obviously, he could have, but I think Sandy Duncan realized that it wasn't really worth it, and neither did Mr. Thayer and the others, because they knew who he was, and they sympathized with the situation, and they knew why he was doing what he was doing, and he wasn't evil or malicious with what he was doing. He was doing it for a noble cause, at least in his mind. And so the picture actually finally gets finished with Sandy, with Sandy Duncan, with Scooby as the lead roles, and Fred, Daphne, Velma, and Shaggy even get parts in the movie. And so Daphne doesn't end up being the stunt woman anymore. Or at least it doesn't look like it. Maybe she might have. But it looks like she got an actual role in the movie. And so did the rest of the gang, which was cool. And they have another successful mystery solved, saving Sandy Duncan in the movie studio from a movie being delayed or canceled. Once the movie is finished, the episode ends with Scooby wanting to go with Sandy to her next movie, but he quickly declines when he hears that she's going to Africa to document wild animals, and he decides to stick around with his best pal Shaggy and the rest of the gang, which is good because Shaggy and the rest of the gang's friendship, Shaggy's friendship with Scooby, as well as the rest of the gang, are more important to Scooby at the end than Sandy Duncan. And plus, that Sandy Duncan romance with Scooby was just very weird and odd, and I don't know why the writers thought that was a good idea. But I'm glad Scooby didn't end up going with Sandy Duncan. I'm going to give Season 1, Episode 7 of the new Scooby Doo Movies 5 stars out of 5. This was a really good episode, and I feel like it was on par with the Don Knotts episode. Not quite as good as that one. I still think the Don Knotts one is still the best one so far. But it's a pretty good episode, and honestly, it showcases that the new Scooby Doo Movies looks like it's starting to get its footing a little bit. We're seeing more better episodes, and after a rocky start, it looks like we're finally starting to get more better episodes, probably because they're getting their footing and they understand what works and what doesn't, and I really did enjoy this episode. Since this is a 5 out of 5 episode, I'll start off with the negatives of the episode first, and I have 2 minor negatives for the episode. The first one I have is that we never get to see Zalia Z Fairchild outside a costume. And that kind of sucks because, like, even though we do learn his backstory a little later, and his motive, which was all good, the fact that we never get to see him is kind of a cop-out because we never get to guess that he's the villain. And while we got a good number of suspects in this episode, it wouldn't have hurt too much to add him into the suspect list. And I think it's kind of a shame that despite having a good amount of suspects, it ended up being a no-name suspect. And normally that doesn't happen when there's a lot of suspects. It usually happens when there's like 1 or 2 suspects, sometimes even no suspects. But in this one, there was like 5 suspects in the episode, and they didn't take advantage of any of them, and they just had this this guy we never saw before end up being the villain. So it's a shame that we never got to see him outside a costume, but that doesn't really hinder it. We do get to learn more about his story once he's revealed. So we do get to learn more about him at the end of the episode. So it's not a huge gripe, but I still would have liked to have seen him outside a costume, just so it wouldn't have hurt to add 1 more suspect. So that way we could at least suspect him. The other minor negative of the episode is that I feel like there was a lack of clues in this episode. There was really only 1 clue, which was the room with the ransom note. Other than that, there really wasn't any clues pointing towards any suspects or, what the villain's motive was. I mean, I guess the note kind of did reveal the villain's intentions and what his possible motive could be, but it was just 1 clue, and while it was good, I would have preferred if we had more clues throughout the episode, so that way we could, kind of narrow down the list of suspects and could have had a chance to guess who it was. So a little more in the clue department definitely would have helped. That's all I got for negatives, though. So let's move on to the positives of the episode, which there are a lot of. First off, we'll start off with the gang. I liked the gang in this episode. I thought they were pretty good. The fact that I don't know how they became friends with an actress like Sandy Duncan, but they were friends with her, and they played off each other well, and they had a good amount of humorous moments, I feel like, and what ended up going into having a lot of shenanigans throughout the episode. And they all got parts in the movie, so it all worked out for them. Starting with Fred, I thought he was a good leader in this episode. He helped fulfill that leadership role really well, and he helped forward the mystery a little bit. He had a couple of humorous moments. I liked his little thing with Daphne when they were fending off the pirate. But other than that, Fred just played his usual role. He didn't really do much outside of that, but that's okay, as long as at least if he's doing his basic role, that's good enough for me. Daphne was really good as well. I like that she was going to be the stunt double for Sandy Duncan, and she kind of put herself a little bit on the line because, like, despite weird happenings going on, and her knowing that this guy's not knowing that this guy is out here trying to do God knows what to this movie, she still goes ahead and decides to be a stunt double in the movie, and I think that's really cool that she got to be a stunt double, and she even got a part at the end. And the gang and she is put in danger at the end of the episode and becomes the damsel in distress for everybody else to save. And I think that's fine with Daphne, as long as Daphne doesn't need to be shown to be strong all the time. I'm okay with seeing her being vulnerable and the gang having to save her. Besides, she's not the only one that always gets kidnapped. There are plenty of others who get kidnapped, and she was just kidnapped just because she was mistaken for Sandy Duncan, not really for any particular personal reason. Or it was just more so that she was just mistaken because Sandy Duncan was wearing a wig that had the same color hair as Daphne, and was wearing the same green dress, so naturally Mr. Hyde confused Daphne for Sandy Duncan. But I think Daphne was given more to do. I think the mystery was more personal because now that she was the stunt double, it meant that she was putting herself in harm's way because we don't really know what this villain's intentions were, and we don't know how far he would take his actions. So Daphne definitely stepped up in this episode, and it was cool to see her be a stunt double and even get a part in the movie at the end. Velma, like Fred, was also a good leader in this episode and helped forward the mystery as well. I feel like Velma, out of the whole gang, got the least to do in this episode, but I will say that she was still good. She got to serve that leadership role. She didn't really do any piecing of the clues together to figure out the mystery, so, the answer to the mystery, so she didn't do that part, but she did fulfill that leadership role with Fred, so I feel like she did at least do the bare minimum, which was good enough for me. And then we have Shaggy and Scooby. Now, Shaggy and Scooby were both pretty funny in this episode, especially with the whole Sandy Duncan love romance thing between Scooby, being in love with Sandy Duncan. Obviously Shaggy did a lot of poking fun at him, and Scooby would clap back at Shaggy about it. But also they just had funny moments outside of that, which was really great. And even though, like I said before, I don't really like the interspecies, romance with Scooby and Sandy, I don't need to see Scooby-Doo fawning over a human like Sandy Duncan. I'd rather he do that with a dog. For me, I'm not really a person that really needs romance in Scooby-Doo. I don't like it. So, I mean, it's not really romance because it's just like Scooby's just being one-sided with it. I don't think Sandy sees Scooby in a romantic way. She just kind of sees him in a friendly way like the rest of the gang. And so I don't like that aspect of the episode. However, it doesn't really bother me and doesn't hurt Scooby's character too much, because he still gets more to do than just fawning over Sandy Duncan. I think if that was all he did, then maybe it wouldn't work for me. Thankfully, he got more to do, so that was good. And despite that whole romance thing of Scooby being, infatuated with Sandy Duncan, he had good chemistry with Sandy Duncan, and so did Shaggy and the rest of the gang. They all had good chemistry with Sandy Duncan, so that worked in their favor at least. And it was good at the end seeing that Scooby put his friendship with Shaggy over Sandy Duncan, even though it seemed like he was ready to put everything on the line to go be with Sandy Duncan. And Shaggy was very upset by that. And once he learned, what Sandy was doing in her next movie, and I don't think Scooby would ever leave Shaggy, knowing how sad he would be. And he's his best friend. He's his buddy, and I think Scooby realized that especially after what Sandy said she was going to do in her next movie. He's like, nah, I think I'm good. I'm going to stay with the gang. Because Scooby may be afraid of ghosts, but he can deal with them better than, at the wild in Africa. And plus, I really like to see... I did like seeing Scooby being heroic in this episode. He was very brave. He tried to help Sandy and Daphne. So he didn't just fawn over Sandy. He actually did try to save Sandy from, the lamp. But he also saved Daphne from being kidnapped, as well as Shaggy and Fred. And he also kind of did save Shaggy as well, even though it was a mechanical lion. He thought, they both thought it was a real lion at first, so he did save Shaggy in that moment. So that showed Scooby's bravery in this episode, and I really like seeing that. Next, we have the guest star of the episode, Sandy Duncan. How was Sandy Duncan? She was pretty good in this episode, actually. Now, the odd thing is that Sandy Duncan is gone for the first half of the episode. Mainly because of how they write the episode, because it's dark out at the beginning of the episode, it becomes nighttime, it becomes late. So, presumably, Sandy decides to go home, but the rest of the gang want to stay later and look for clues, and they end up staying there overnight. And I get why Sandy wasn't there. I still would have preferred had they written it differently to where Sandy would have joined them. But thankfully, Sandy did help them in the second half when it was daytime and they were ready to shoot. And she was back on the lot and Daphne got kidnapped. Sandy was ready to help the gang in any way and was trying to help solve the mystery. And she had great chemistry with the gang throughout. So I feel like Sandy fulfilled her, the guest star role that she should have, which was having good chemistry with all the members of the gang. And she helped forward the mystery by trying to help any way she can to save Daphne, but to also figure out what was going on. And plus, the gang got her up to speed on what was going on, and she was interested in it. She wanted to stop it. So I feel like she was a very good guest star and did what a guest star was supposed to do. Then you have the villain of the episode, and the villain's kind of very different in this one, because normally there's a main monster to go after, but this villain does a lot of villains in this episode, like a lot of costumes. So he starts out as this plain ass white ghost. It's pretty creepy, to be quite honest. I actually think his first one was pretty spooky, and even if that had been his main one, I would have liked it. It barely had a face, and it was creepy as shit. He also dressed up as the freaky sheik that Shaggy and Scooby ran into, the pirate that Fred and Daphne ran into, as well as Velma, and he also controlled the dragon while dressed up as the pirate. An off-screen King Kong, a werewolf, which the werewolf was fucking creepy. Had he stayed in that one, that would have been just as freaky. A grizzly bear, Chief Blood in the Eye, the Indian chief, and of course his main costume, which was in the main villain persona, which is Mr. Hyde. So for the purposes of this one, I'll just talk about Mr. Hyde, because that's really the main villain role he plays. I like Mr. Hyde as a villain, and I actually think he looks really creepy and cool. I think all the villains that a Fairchild plays are either really creepy and scary, or they're fun and entertaining. So either way, I like all of his villain personas in their own unique way. And even if you don't like one of the villain personas, because he changes so frequently and becomes different monsters and different villains, it gives a nice variety, because you think it's more than one guy, but this guy's got a lot of talent to change into different personas and villain personas. Now, they don't have really any backstory, but I feel like that's fine, as long as the villain is either scary or creepy or menacing, or is at least entertaining and fun to watch, which I think he fulfills all that. He did a great job as all of them. And I think standouts for me were the ghost in the beginning, that fucking werewolf, which was creepy as shit when Fred, Daphne, and Velma saw that werewolf. That was a freaky one. Had he kept that on, I would have liked that one. And Mr. Hyde, which I thought Mr. Hyde was pretty cool, pretty good. It did have a little bit of a goofy face, but not as goofy as the villain from the last episode, at least. That was only when he was confused at the end. But mostly, he was pretty freaky. Like, his face was freaky. I would have been okay with the white ghost one, and the werewolf. But I think overall, all his villain personas, like I said, they were either scary and creepy, and because like, you didn't know how far he was going to take his dangerous scare tactics, because like, he wasn't fucking around. He almost hurt Sandy. He could have almost hurt the gang at certain points. And while he wasn't trying to accomplish that, he did. There were moments where where he did very dangerous things to scare the gang and Sandy Duncan that could have led to some harm had things not worked in their favor. But I think the villain overall was good. I liked all the villain personas. They were either fun or entertaining, or they were spooky and scary and creepy and a little bit menacing and threatening. So I think we got the full package in this episode. Plus, I like the variety in the villain department, so it was good. Then we have the motive of the villain, which I actually think the motive of the villain was good and unique. I thought it was a nice motive. It made you sympathize with him, because once you knew his backstory and his motive behind motives behind why he did it, because he didn't want Mammoth Studios to be torn down, because to him this was his home. He had disappeared. This meant a lot to him. This was a special place for him. This is the only world he knew, and he liked the studio a lot, and he thought the studio should be preserved for the rest of as long as he is alive, because to him this studio means a lot. He likes the studio. He likes like all the lots and everything. Like this is his world. So it may not mean anything to anyone else, but to him it was special, and that's why he didn't do it for any malicious or evil intent. He was doing it because to him this was a movie studio that meant a lot to him, and he didn't want it torn down. And I think that's a good motive. Like, unlike Never Ape and Ape Man, where that was a little selfish, and I didn't like Carl's motive in that one, I feel like in this one it's good because like he's not doing it for selfish reasons. Like, yeah, he likes the lot and the studio, but I would say that he was doing it not for himself, but just to preserve the history of the studio. He didn't feel like this studio should be torn down because there was probably a lot of history to it, and he was an example of that. So I thought his motive was pretty good. I think it was nice and unique, and it made you sympathize with him once you learned his backstory and you understand why he did the things he did. Now, some of his actions were definitely questionable, and he could have easily hurt the gang or Sandy Duncan, but he never was malicious or evil and didn't want to hurt the gang or Sandy Duncan. It just so happens that he just like would take his scare tactics to another level, to where had things messed up, he could have hurt them, but I don't think he ever meant to. He just had to take it an extra step, probably because he figured like that his usual scare tactics weren't working, and so he had to ramp it up to make sure the movie wouldn't get finished and the lot wouldn't be torn down. The mystery of the episode was good too. I actually did like the mystery of who is trying to stop this movie from being finished, and what's their motive? Like, why are they doing it? Who's haunting this? Like, who's trying to stop this movie from finishing? And why are they doing it? What's the reasoning? Especially for a high-profile movie such as Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, this is an interesting mystery. You want to know why this person's doing this, especially once Daphne becomes a part of it and, is part of the stunt crew. Now, like, the gang have a reason to get involved because, Daphne's going to be involved in the movie. But also, I mean, they probably would have done it anyways because Sandy Duncan, it seems like, is their friend. Then we have the atmosphere of the episode, and I actually think the atmosphere was pretty filled with tension and suspense. It wasn't necessarily scary, especially in the second half. I think the first half was definitely a little more creepy because of the nighttime atmosphere, but once it got to daytime, it was less creepy. But I will say that the atmosphere was filled with tension and suspense because you didn't know what villain the gang were going to encounter next. but you also didn't know how far that villain would take his dangerous scare tactics. How far was this villain going to go to make sure the gang wouldn't stop the villain from completing his mission? And what persona was this villain going to put on next? Finally, I found the setting of the episode to be pretty good and actually really great, to be quite honest. A movie studio was definitely a different type of setting and something we hadn't seen in Scooby Doo before. And because a movie studio has a lot of movie lots and movie sets, it provides variety in the setting because we get to technically go into multiple locations and multiple different sets. Even though it's just really one location, you feel like you're exploring multiple locations. You know, the gang could be in Alaska, or they could be in Philadelphia, or Tokyo, or London, or any of these other places. And it was really cool. There was a lot of variety in the setting, and it was something new and creative. And while it wasn't scary per se, it was nice and unique and creative, and something we hadn't seen in the franchise yet to this point. And while we had a movie set in Never Ape and Ape Man, it's not the same thing because that's just one singular set that was on location in like a mountain. Whereas this one was like a movie studio with a bunch of movie lots and sets that were all different and had different and were trying to catch, trying to feel like different settings. So I like the setting of the episode. It had a lot of variety in it, and it gave room for the gang to explore, for more clues and to help solve the mystery, but it also gave the gang room to play with the villain and get up to a lot of shenanigans with the villain as well. Overall, guys, I would recommend this episode to fans and newcomers of the show. It doesn't top the Don Knotts episode, but it is definitely one that you should check out, as it's probably the second best one so far. It's easily one of the better episodes of the new Scooby Doo movies. It has a lot of good things going for it, and while there was 2 minor negatives for it, they don't really hurt the episode too much, and they're just elements that made it, that held it back from being perfect. But obviously, that's a hard thing to accomplish. Not many episodes are going to be perfect, but this one was pretty good and is easily one of the best episodes in the new Scooby Doo movies, and I highly recommend you check it out, especially since Sandy Duncan is still alive and she's also in Scooby Doo and Guess Who. So if you saw that Guess Who episode, or if you want to see like a double feature and kind of match this episode up with the Guess Who episode, this is actually a really good episode to watch. Like, I think it's really good, so check it out. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the review. Please give it a like if you did. Comment down below your thoughts on the episode. If you like this episode, or you like me, do you consider it one of the best episodes of the new Scooby Doo movies and rank it pretty highly? Do you hate this episode? I'd be interested in that as well. Like, are you not big on this episode? Do you think I'm being too positive with it? You think that, there's a lot wrong with it, that maybe you have different standards for it? Or are you somewhere in the middle where you think it's okay, but it's not good or bad? I'm curious for your thoughts, so let me know. And subscribe for more Scooby Doo content like this, or if you're just interested in any of my other content. Obviously, like I said before, because Scooby Doo is going to be the focus of my 2024 summer special, so there'll be plenty more Scooby Doo reviews on the way, both re-reviews of Scooby Doo Where Are You, as well as more new Scooby Doo movies reviews. So if you're interested in that, then be on the lookout, because they'll be out at least once a week. At least I'll try to upload once a week. You can also follow me on Facebook, where I have discussions about things we talk about on both my channels, and Twitch, where I hope to live stream in the future. So in my next video, I will continue my 2024 summer special with the release of my Season 1 Episode 3 review of Scooby Doo Where Are You. It's going to be my re-review, my updated thoughts on the episode. So if you want to see my updated thoughts on the Hassle on the Castle episode and see if my opinion has changed on that, then you can check that out in the next video. But after that, we will continue with the new Scooby Doo movies with Season 1 Episode 8 of the new Scooby Doo movies, titled The Secret of Shark Island, guest starring Sonny and Cher. And from what I remember, that episode is viewed pretty highly by a lot of Scooby Doo fans, so I'm expecting this is going to be a good follow-up episode, but we'll see if Sonny and Cher can pull out a good episode. And yeah, I wasn't kidding when in the intro when I said, like, you know, keep an eye on Sonny and Cher's name, because they will be our guest stars in the next episode. So if you're interested in my thoughts on that, then join me in the next video after that, where we will get into the Sonny and Cher episode. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching this video, and as always, peace out.
Scooby, Scooby Doo, looking for you. Scooby, Scooby Doo, where are you? All the stars are here, waiting for you. Couldn't have a show without you. Scooby, Scooby Doo, Scooby, Scooby Doo.